everybody, welcome back. So, I was very excited about the topic I wanted to do in today's video. I wanted to talk about twins. And although this is a topic that a lot of people probably aren't quite familiar with, I figured who not better to get it from than somebody who can relate to it personally. So, here we are, going to talk about twins. So this topic is going to be probably a lot more in-depth than some of the other things I've discussed. So I've decided to make this segment into two parts to be sure I cover kind of the more sciencey kind of medical background as well as my own personal experience as a twin too. So there are a couple of different types of twins that you've probably heard of. So I'll start with the main two that people are probably the most familiar with. So there's identical and then there's fraternal. So most of you watching this probably know how people are made, right? You know, birds and bees. Well, assuming that you've got that covered already, then we're off to a good start. So yeah, one egg, one sperm makes a person, right? Well, that's how it is with identical twins in the beginning, although this one goes a little bit differently later on down the line. So yeah, you get the one egg and the one sperm cell just like any other person. But what happens in this particular situation is instead of just being the one egg with the one sperm cell, the one egg that's there to start with actually splits into two. So then once they start growing and developing, they become two people. And then once these two people are kind of out in the world doing their own thing, they look very similar in appearance most of the time. Their DNA is nearly identical. Of course, their personalities and stuff are going to be different too, because no two people are exactly the same. But identical twins are really very fascinating for a lot of people, especially in like science and the world of medicine, because they really kind of helped explore a lot of things as far as research. How likely is it that their twin, like if one twin develops a certain disease, that the other will develop one? Or if there's been families where maybe the twins have siblings, kind of studying like, okay, if one sibling gets a disease from one of the parents. I mean, things like that in science are very tricky with genes. Sometimes you don't know who's going to develop a certain disease, who's going to, like if one twin does have a disease, if their twin is going to get it or not, because like fraternal twins are trickier, but with identical twins, there are some diseases that if they are genetic and one twin gets it, that their twin is most certainly going to get it because they have the same genes, they have the same DNA. But then if it's something like mental illness where it's kind of hit or miss, one twin could develop it and the other may not. One twin may have allergies and the other may not. I mean, again, two people that can look so similar and be very similar even can still grow up fairly differently, despite what people may think, because they did split and become two separate people, even though they started from the same origin, like the same egg. And it's also very fascinating because everybody's fingerprints are for the most part different, but with identical twins, I believe they're also different, but they can be quite similar compared to, obviously, if they have another sibling. If you had two identical twins and one needed a kidney transplant, the one could donate a kidney to their twin. Their twin, they could still technically reject the organ, but it's far less likely because of how similar their DNA is. So that could actually work very well in saving their twin's life. And I think that's kind of a part with identical twins that people aren't always very familiar with, and it's very, very fascinating. But then, of course, like anything, they can respond to medications differently, just like any person can. So that's kind of some insight on the identical twins. With fraternal twins, unlike the whole one egg, one sperm cell scenario, sometimes with ovulation, one egg can be ovulated at a time, most of the time, but in some cases, multiple eggs, like two or more, can be ovulated. So with fraternal twins, there's two eggs to start out with, but then there's two different sperm cells, one for each egg. So with fraternal twins, their DNA is more likely to be like ordinary siblings, where obviously they have the same parents, but they're going to be two separate people, different genes, different risks for different diseases, that kind of thing. But one actually very fascinating thing with fraternal twins is, although it can be rather rare, fraternal twins having two different eggs and two different sperm cells also makes it possible that the two siblings that come from these two separate eggs could actually have different fathers depending on the circumstances. Probably not super common, but as it would have to be timed very closely together. the intercourse with creating one twin versus the intercourse with another person creating the second twin would probably have to be within days apart from each other in order for them to have two different parents to father them. But it's happened in some cases, and it's actually rather interesting because people think that fraternal twins are going to be so similar like identical twins are, but they're actually quite different. I mean, if there's you and your family and then you have another brother or sister, you share the same DNA with them that two fraternal twins would share with each other. So with them donating organs and certain risks for diseases, it's going to be more randomized than in the case of identical twins. And fraternal twins, although they come within the same pregnancy, it's two different eggs and stuff, because they have two different eggs and two different sperm cells, they can be different ethnicities, they can be different genders, they can have different hair color, eye color, and a lot of different really amazing features that, again, you would see with kind of other siblings, but you kind of just get the 2-for-1 deal if you think about it. So yeah, so you have fraternal twins and identical twins. Those are the two main types of twins. I did want to briefly touch base on a couple others. These ones are not as common, so I'll try to tread lightly on these because there's still that needs to be learned about really both of these types. I don't know how many of you have heard of conjoined twins. This one gets a little bit trickier because you have two individuals that are connected. It's believed that they probably started out as, a lot of people believe that they probably started out as identical twins. One egg, one sperm creates two people, but they believe that they may not have split all the way. But there's also some debate as to, maybe they were actually two separate, eggs or two separate people. But sometimes in pregnancy you can have two babies, you can have twins at first, maybe early on, then maybe by the second trimester there's only one, because in some cases sometimes one twin does absorb the other and then only one ends up making it out, which is of course very sad, but it does happen sometimes, and they have wondered about that with certain conditions like chimerism, where somebody has multiple sets of DNA, if maybe that person was a twin and they absorbed their twin. There's also a condition called Vanishing Twin Syndrome, where, maybe you have, I've heard that supposedly you have maybe organs if you absorbed your twin, and then there's psychological parts of it too, like kind of schizophrenic-like symptoms. That's not a very well understood disease either, but there's debate as to if maybe, if somebody was a twin and they absorbed their twin, that maybe they had some lingering things from their twin that they absorbed, whether it's the organs, the psychological aspect, or combination of the two. So that's kind of some other stuff. But yeah, so with conjoined twins, they are, sadly, there's not a lot of them around. There's some, but it's very rare. So they are usually conjoined at various parts of their body, and it can be, it doesn't really have to be a specific part of their body, but there are some that are conjoined at the head. There's some that are conjoined maybe at the hip, and maybe they kind of share a torso. They may have extra organs. They may have an extra leg, and things. And it's a very kind of complex situation. There's so many different kind of types of them you've kind of heard. I always found that one very fascinating. I know I've heard of a couple different types of them, but really kind of wondering, that their lives must be very interesting, living, kind of working as a team on a regular basis. So that's one you can see in some situations at times, but not quite as common as identical or fraternal twins, of course, but very, very fascinating if you've ever read up on it. But again, more research needs to be kind of done on that. They're not really sure why it happens, but it's pretty incredible to see what the body can do, and how two people like that can live together, and they can be different in personality, just like me or my best friend. Even though they're very similar, they can still have their differences and all that. So yeah, you might have heard of that one in some cases. There's also a couple cases I've heard of. This is believed to be a very rare form of twins, but they're not sure because technology has developed over time. So we actually have the modern technology to see these kind of cases if more of them show up. But there have been a couple cases of what are called semi-identical twins. So basically, they were supposed to be like identical twins. They start out with one egg, but instead of being hit by one sperm cell and then the egg splitting and creating two people, they were actually hit by two sperm cells at the exact same time. So when you kind of think of the concept of fraternal twins and identical twins, it seems like it's almost kind of an in-between, where it's like starting out like the identical twins, but then two sperm cells like the fraternal twins. I've only heard of 2 cases where this has happened, because again, it's believed to be extremely rare, but the 2 cases were only 4 years apart. that doesn't sound very rare. 4 years apart, like, that sounds like that's actually probably more common than we expect. But again, technology has changed, it's developed, and we have the tools to actually spot this thing, like actually when somebody's still pregnant versus just when after the kids are born. And they usually test the placenta when twins are born if they're testing to see if they're identical or fraternal or anything. Not every parent chooses to, I believe it's usually at the parent's discretion, and not every parent gets it tested to see what kind of twins they are. So that kind of leaves that more open for, hey, there could be more cases than that people don't realize because maybe they didn't see, like if they had twins, they didn't get them tested to see which type they were. So I remember reading about that and just thinking that was so incredible. I just love reading about twins in general. It'd be so cool if people understood like what it was like to be a twin, actually got to grow up experiencing that. But of course I'm going into that in my next video, so I'm not going to go too deep into that just yet. I just wanted to kind of open this topic for a discussion and kind of provide some insight. It's just so incredible. You hear, I mean, I love learning about medical stuff, science, the body, everything. And the more I read about twins, it just makes me happy that I'm a twin, and I was given somebody in my life who was the same age as me and going through life with me together, and yeah, and answering people's questions about being a twin also. And you know, I guess I kind of forget not everybody knows what that's like unless they grew up as a twin, like myself. But I'm going into that into my next video. So if you want to know more, stay tuned. And have a great day, guys.